Hello ladies and gentlemen and welcome. Let's have a look at SCUM, a la the new zombie mech survival walking simulator game that's just released on Steam Early Access on the 30th of August 2018 for a whopping $20 US or $30 rounded up if you're in Australia. I've logged about 26 hours into the game, 20 of which were online with a buddy and 3 of which were in single player mode. We'll break this video down into 5 sections: the options and settings, gameplay features, gameplay loop, and the overall feeling and verdict of the game. Let's start with the overall feel and verdict. Overall, I enjoyed my time playing SCUM, yet the lack of features is apparent and the journey to endgame is a lot shorter when compared to other games. When you figured out the best place to loot and are able to obtain some of the highest end gear within 10 to 20 minutes, there's no real need to craft improvised spears and backpacks. If you're a fan of the original DayZ mod and or picked up the DayZ standalone and wish for something more, then perhaps SCUM may have what you're looking for. However, SCUM is in its infancy stages and there is no way to tell what direction the game will head towards. I personally think that with the introduction of solid PvE mechanics and the lack of reliance on other players to be a game, the future does look promising. Would I recommend it for the price tag of $20 US? Yeah, I probably would, but only if you're an aficionado for survival games of this genre that more closely mimics the DayZ experience than, say, Ark Survival Evolved or Rust. If you're looking for a battle royale experience or instant action, then this game would not be for you, as the combat is broken up into lengthy bits of traversal and exploration. If you're on a time budget, then I would also skip this game altogether, as the game almost demands for a long play session in order to fully realize its experience. For the options and settings, a game's options and settings can most definitely break or make the game. My personal values for a game's option and settings is the ability to customize each option, with great focus on windowed mode, resolution changes, rebindable keys, VSync, and motion blur. All of the rest are considered bonuses in my books, and the ease of applying them, as well as their overall impact on the gameplay quality, are also factors to consider, because having to restart a game after you make any changes in order to see them take any effect, it can really bog down the benchmarking process. SCUM offers a wide variety of video settings, such as a range of resolutions, full screen or windowed mode, dynamic shadows, post-processing, effects quality, texture quality, render resolution, view distance, foliage quality, and the list goes on. On an i5 7400 CPU at 3GHz quad-core and a NVIDIA GTX 1070 with 8GB of video RAM and 16GB of RAM, I was able to run all the settings on Epic, their highest available setting. I turned motion blur off, resolution at 1280 by 720, with depth of field turned off. Overall, the game looked gorgeous and ran great with 60 FPS and buttery smooth movements. However, there may have been sort of like a memory leak in the game or something similar to that, as after 3 to 4 hours of continuous play, the game will begin to stutter every few seconds. The optimization also has room for improvement, as the CPU usage clocks in at around 70 to 80% on my PC, whilst GPU sits at around 40 to 60%. Video settings aside, we also have control bindings. It does appear that each and every key can be reassigned, which is fantastic and exactly what I look for in games. One of the first changes I made was to change the toggling of third person to first person with the V key instead of the enter key. Mouse sensitivity also has options in the first and third person perspectives, as well as zoomed and scoped views, which offers very versatile sensitivity profiles for different mechanics that the game offers. Moving on to game features. The main features in SCUM are essentially PvE elements with zombies and mechs, PvP elements with other players, though this is kind of rare unless you're in a densely populated 64-player server, hunting and butchering of bears, boars, deers, donkeys, and horses, and of course exploration and looting, and a somewhat in-depth nutrition system. Just as a bit of an overhead, the game also features fame points, which accumulates for essentially each action that you take. The more you have, the more forgiving your next respawn will be, as it allows you to choose what sector you want to spawn in, or whether you spawn on your shelter or your teammate. Now, to talk about the zombies, and I air quote zombies as they run and smack you rather than chomp on your flesh, they are apparently Season 1 contestants who have become controlled by BDU devices implanted in the back of their heads, and the players are Season 2 contestants, if my source is to be believed, but I don't really check my sources. I'm lazy. But lore aside, the zombies feel good to fight against. They don't do awkward clipping through walls or crazy charge animations, they don't clip through the player, and they generally react realistically to being hit by a melee weapon. Blood splatters also look good, as do bleeding wounds. There aren't any infection statuses or diseases that I'm aware of, which makes sense given the setting, as they're not real zombies. Next up are the huge walking mechs that patrol a set route and investigate noises players make within a certain radius. They are destructible given enough effort, and award a good number of fame points for each bullet that you put into them. Generally, they guard some of the best loot that the game has to offer, and it makes it extremely difficult to get past them in certain places, such as the many prisons dotted throughout the map that house underground bunkers acting as armories for players to gear up with military-grade equipment. There are huntable animals like the bear, deer, boar, donkey, and horses, as I mentioned earlier, complete with like butchering and cooking for their meats and fats for nutrition at a campfire. Though you could also butcher and cook the zombies that roam the land, as well as any other players that you may find and kill if you decide to do that. So SCUM also features looting, which obviously most games of this genre should have, but it also has a complex yet intuitive inventory management system. Essentially each piece of Essentially, each piece of clothing that you pick up and wear provides you with extra pockets and slots limited by the total weight your clothing can carry. It makes for better immersion, such as putting rifle magazines in your pant pockets and large sticks in your backpack, rather than the other way around. For crafting, item combinations, such as using knives serving canned foods, and a slightly advanced weapon system for finding bullets and their magazines before combining them into a weapon. There are also shelters that you can craft, where upon death you respawn directly at it. If you have squad mates, you can spawn on them, though if you have squad mates, you must first meet up before adding one another into a party. Luckily, the game also features a map with real-time tracking of your position, so finding your friends is never too long of a journey, unless you spawn on the other side of the map. Traversal in the game can be extremely lengthy and monotonous due to the lack of vehicles in this current build, as stretches of land filled with nothing but beautiful vistas can be entertaining for only so long. The game also features realistic ballistics, though the extent of this is not as a simulation territory like Arma, so you won't feel as though you're an uncoordinated monkey trying to fire a rifle. SCUM also features skills that you can improve through gameplay. There are a lot of skills planned, but currently what is in the game includes boxing or unarmed combat, melee weapons, rifles, pistols, running, stamina, stealth, alertness, sniping, camouflage, and survival. It's sort of like a handful of skills there. Each and every one of these skills are tied to your main attributes of strength, dexterity, constitution, and intelligence, though whether your main attributes has an effect on long-term gameplay remains to be seen. I believe they're supposed to improve the rate at which you learn those skills, but I'm unsure, I can't test this. But other than that, they seem to just increase your starting stats when you first make a character. One other notable feature is about the camouflage and alert skill. The game fixes a fairly large complaint I've had for other games that mix first and third person cameras in a multiplayer setting, and that is corner peeking with a camera, where you're able to get an advantage by hiding behind a wall and using your camera to swing out to peek without exposing yourself. According to a few sources, the game simply does not render a player if A, your character cannot see them via a direct line of sight, or B, their camouflage skill, which is altered by their clothing, exceeds your character's awareness skill. I still haven't had a chance to test this extensively, but it does seem that within 100 meters, your character is able to see any player regardless of their skills, unless they are behind a wall. And finally, perhaps the holy grail of the game's survival features is the nutrition system. At first glance, it seems extremely complicated, however the mechanics ultimately break down into eating and drinking until your stomach is near full, and waiting for the food to digest before you benefit from the calorie, vitamin, and mineral gains. Overeating and you vomit, drink too much, you'll need to urinate more often, and you even need to poop at times. It's interesting to note that the developers took time to animate different types of poop depending on your nutrition status, from good solid logs to sprays of just grotesque brown liquid. It's absolutely hilarious when you first watch your character squat to relieve himself, and it's even more so when you eat the wrong foods and suddenly have to squat down for diarrhea, or you start vomiting whilst zombies are chasing you or a mech is in your sights. On top of the fancy nutrition mechanics are also injuries and overheating. Though injuries are fairly basic in that whenever you're injured, you just require to bandage yourself before you bleed out. Overheating to stage 4 hypothermia can lead to sudden loss of consciousness, where your character faints and is unable to do anything for a short period of time. Though there aren't any actual in-game indicators of this other than a little tiny status effect. So when it first happens, you might be a little bit confused, as I was. As for the gameplay loop, essentially the gameplay loop of SCUM is broken down into exploration or traversal and then looting. It's a fairly simple short loop that can feel rewarding when you initially start the game, as most of the map is unknown to you and every town that you go to is a bit of a journey. Yet, when you find the best spots to find the best gear, more often than not you'll be going to the same places, unless exploration is a key factor in your gameplay experience. If that's the case, you can definitely bear witness to some fantastic views and locales, because some of the towns are very beautifully made, and set in very beautifully set places. But though most of the buildings tend to be run down, and the insides are, flipped furniture and whatnot. This gameplay loop is mostly only broken by the occasional zombie or zombie horde, the mechs, and very rarely other players. Meeting with other players can be an adrenaline-filled affair, though I noticed that the game lacks a distinct feeling of pressure that you would get in games like DayZ, and this may be attributed to the forgiving respawn system with choosing your own sector, shelter, or teammate to respawn at for the cost of easily accumulated fame points. Another factor might be the in-game microphone. Currently the volume is much too low, so any actual voice interaction is very rare, and ever since DayZ became a mainstream game and most people know about it, in games like this most people just shoot on sight, so there's no actual player interaction to happen. There is also an in-game chat. You can have it local, and there's also a global chat for it, though I don't really see people use that too often. But beyond looting and exploration, you'll likely spend some time making a shelter near your favorite point of interest on the map in order to hoard the loot that you find for your future self, should you meet an unfortunate end, which will eventually happen if a mech shoots you through a wall or you get an unlucky headshot. But other than that, that about wraps up a look at SCUM. Hopefully the developers stick with it. It'll be interesting to see where SCUM ends up in about a year's time. I'm definitely looking forward to when they add more vehicles, and I'll check it out again if they do. Other than that, thanks for watching. Yeah, here we go, combo 1, 2, 1. Oh no, I'm out of stamina.